Good morning and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very, very special segment today on the weekend edition of Australian Indian Radio and Brisbane Indian Times, a Chantex multimedia presentation. Well, right now we have lots to talk about today, and let's get back into the show. It's wonderful to have your company today. And today, the 8th of October, the weather is looking mostly cloudy. It's 22 degrees right at this point in time. Well, with without much ado, let's get the show on the road with the first news for today. Let's take a look at all the headlines for today and see what's actually making news.
Thailand's king has visited the families of victims of a massacre at a childcare centre in the country's northeast. 36 people were killed in the knife and gun attack on Thursday, including 24 children. Most of them were napping when the attacker entered the centre. The king has pledged to cover the cost of the funerals.
The school district in Uvalde, Texas has suspended its entire police force 5 months after 19 students and 2 teachers were killed in a mass shooting. The department has been under investigation for its response to the attack, including delays by officers to enter the classroom where the gunman was holed up.
A severe weather warning is in place for large parts of New South Wales ahead of more wild weather late today and early tomorrow. Heavy rainfall and damaging winds are forecast for Sydney, parts of the Hunter, Illawarra, Central Tablelands and the South Coast. Minor to major flood warnings are in place for several waterways, including the Macquarie, Lachlan, Barwon and Darling rivers.
And Australia has defeated the West Indies in the T20 International at the Gabba. David Warner set up the 31-run win, while number 6 batter Tim David shone in front of World Cup selectors.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, once again to this weekend edition of Brisbane Indian Times and Australian Indian Radio's segment. And today, don't forget that at 10 a.m. we have Aapki Sehat, meaning the doctor's program which we bring to you every month. And the October episode will air today at 10 a.m. So make sure that you tune in for that. Well, right now, as was said in our news highlights, that Sydney has recorded one of the wettest year on record.
What's incredible is we've still got nearly 3 months left in the year. We've got 164 years of data for Sydney, and we've already passed the previous record, which was 1950. That year, 2194 millimetres of rain has fallen. Now up to around 1:20 p.m. this afternoon, the figure already above 2,200 millimetres for this year. But that rain is so heavy, that total, it is flying up today.
So there you are, the climate change and the weather patterns which are changing. So, of course, this is how things are happening right at this point in time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now let's go into the next news, where there is a lot of speculation about the future of the tax cuts.
Thanks to back-to-back shocks like the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the lagging effects of COVID, the global economic outlook is darkening.
Our world economy is like ship in choppy waters.
And the International Monetary Fund's predicting things are likely to get worse before they get better.
And that is something that, of course, feeds into budget deliberations.
After letting speculation about the future of already legislated income tax cuts run all week, the Prime Minister's warned difficult decisions will have to be made in this month's budget to help curb inflation.
Isn't that you laying the groundwork to amend or claw back some of those stage 3 tax cuts?
No, that's me being economically literate.
The nation's bottom line is being squeezed by the rising annual costs of defence, hospitals, aged care, the NDIS and interest repayments.
We will put a premium on what is responsible.
The Treasurer seeming to suggest that if a group of Australians are to be carved out of the stage 3 cuts at some point, it shouldn't be those doing it toughest.
I think we've made the obvious point that when it comes to cost of living relief, it should be targeted at people on low and middle incomes.
Interest rates have risen dramatically and the global outlook has worsened substantially since Labor committed to implementing the stage 3 cuts. Formally, its position hasn't changed, but if it does, it could be very politically risky. The opposition leaders declared it would be a betrayal of voters' trust.
The Prime Minister looked the Australian public in the eye and gave them a solemn promise.
And if it's broken, he's vowing to pursue the government over it until the next election. James Glenday, ABC News, Canberra.
And of course, promises are promises, election promises, but delivering on that could sometimes be challenging. Well, we'll see how things fare out in that field. But on the other field, we're talking about this interest rate. So there is talks about that there may still be another interest rate hike.
Well, look, I think over the past month, they'd been signalling in their communication that they were ready to slow the pace of tightening down. Obviously, we weren't sure exactly what they would deliver this week. But if you go back and you look at the communication over the last few weeks, they were talking about the lags between a change in the cash rate, how that impacts home borrower cash flow. They were talking a lot about the uncertainties in terms of how the consumer would respond to interest rate hikes. And I think in that context, what they did this week was a prudent move. It was in line with what we called at Commonwealth Bank. And I think there's probably a bit of a collective sigh of relief out there for households that have got a mortgage, that even though rates went up, they didn't go up by that 50 basis points that the market had priced.
On Friday, in its biannual financial stability review, the RBA noted global risks have increased amid rising uncertainty, but it's now even more out of step with the pace of hiking by other central banks that are still going with the supersized hikes. This could be a major challenge for us, couldn't it?
Oh, look, I wouldn't say it's a challenge. In fact, I'd say it's a good news story, the fact that the RBA feels confident to slow the pace of tightening down when other central banks aren't in that place. And I think really that's reflective of the fact that wages growth isn't as strong in Australia as it is in other jurisdictions. In fact, the Reserve Bank still wants wages growth to get up to around 3.5%. And according to our internal data at Commonwealth Bank, it's running at 3%. I think the other thing too to keep in mind is that the rate of inflation in Australia is not as high as it is elsewhere. And the other thing is too that we have a more direct transmission mechanism between the cash rate and how that then impacts on the mortgage market and home borrower cash flow. So I think the RBA was cognizant of all those dynamics. I think the fact that they felt confident to slow the pace of tightening first amongst the major central banks is a good sign. And I think the other thing too is that the Commonwealth budget will work in the RBA's favour. What we've seen, if you look at England, for example, is that fiscal policy and monetary policy don't necessarily work complementary at times. But I think in Australia's case, there is something of a coordinated response between what the government intends to do later on this month and what the Reserve Bank is trying to do.
Nevertheless, the RBA does expect 1 in 5 households will struggle with their higher mortgage repayments. How deep do you think that mortgage stress could be?
Well, I think ultimately it will depend on how high the Reserve Bank takes the cash rate. The higher they go, the more that's going to negatively impact households. We think they don't have too much further to run at Commonwealth Bank. The house view is that they go up by another 25 basis points next month and are then on hold. The risk is that they probably do another 50 basis points. But I think as long as they don't take the cash rate too much above 3%, home borrowers in the main will be okay. Many will have to change their spending behaviour, and that's a natural response to higher interest rates. But I don't think that it'll have a negative impact on the labour market. We don't want the unemployment rate to go up in Australia. It's at a 50-year low. It's a good news story, and I think as long as the RBA doesn't take the cash rate too much higher from where it is right now, the economy is going to hold up reasonably well.
We've already seen property prices start to slide. How big do you think the falls will be from top to bottom?
Well, we've had the view out there for a while that we think the peak to trough fall will be around 15%. Again, it's very much conditional on what the Reserve Bank does with the cash rate. I think provided they don't take the cash rate too much higher, that 15% forecast for a fall is about on the money. But of course, if the further they take the cash rate, the more home prices will slide. So there's an inherent circularity here with calling the Reserve Bank and also then what happens to the economy and the housing market. But the view we've got at Commonwealth Bank is that they're not going to take the cash rate too much higher, and therefore the peak to trough fall in home prices will be around 15%.
Gareth, this is all coming at the same time the International Monetary Fund has warned of another sobering downgrade. How does Australia face this new economic era?
Look, it's a challenging time, and that's been very much what the Governor of the Reserve Bank has been talking about recently, what our Treasurer is talking about. The global outlook has deteriorated, and part of that deterioration is coming about because central banks are raising rates to try and get the rate of inflation down. So Australia is part of the global story, obviously, and there are some challenges to that extent. But I think domestically we're better placed than a number of other economies, and that's been reflected in what the Reserve Bank has actually done this week, which is to raise the cash rate but not raise it by as much as what other central banks are doing, to the extent that they haven't slowed the pace of tightening. And I think domestically we're much better placed than a number of other economies.
Finally, Gareth, you touched on earlier central banks working, I guess, in lockstep with policymakers, and we saw what happened in the UK in the last week or so. The Treasurer here now under pressure to scrap the Stage 3 tax cuts in this month's budget, especially after what we saw over in the UK. He seems to have left the door open for some potential changes.
Yeah, look, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I mean, the changes to this, it is policy, legislated policy, and it wasn't taken to the electorate ahead of the election, so it would be a bit of a shock, I think, if they were to change policy, given that's not what they actually took to the electorate. But it's a story for a few years' time anyway, so it's not actually going to impact on demand in the short run. And I think any tweaks around the Stage 3 tax cuts aren't actually going to change the outlook for the economy in the near term.
Gareth Aird, great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for your time.
Nice to chat, Rachel.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio and Brisbane Indian Times Weekend Edition. Right now, here's a message from our sponsors.
GlobeNet Realty. GlobeNet Realty has been the longest established, trusted and respected agency in its trade area. Washa Chandra, Director of GlobeNet Realty, provides honest and ethical service to her customers. If you are thinking of investing in Brisbane real estate market, or if you are seeking professional property management, then you should contact Usha Chandra today on landline 3865 4466 or mobile 0419 775 416. And for further updates, log on to our website www.globenetralty.com.au. GlobeNet Realty is your own local real estate agency. Situated at Shop 52281 Sandgate Road, Boondall. GlobeNet Realty. Real estate is our world.
Real estate is our world, and don't forget that every Wednesday we have the real estate update with Usha Chandra right here on this channel. As today at 10 a.m. we will have this month's episode of Aapki Sehat, which is the presentation of Indian Medical Association of Queensland with their monthly episode on health issues. So that's coming up at 10. But today it's a weekend, so here's a little bit of a treat for you.
Nowhere to go and no place to call home. My only friend was a man in the moon, and even sometimes he would go away too. Then one night as I closed my eyes, I saw a shadow flying high. He came to me with the sweetest smile, told me he wanted to talk for a while. He said, Peter Pan, that's what they call me. I promise that you'll never be lonely. And ever since that day, I am a lost boy from Neverland, and usually hang out with Peter Pan. And when we're bored we play in the woods, always on the run from Captain Hook. Say to me, away from all of reality. Neverland is home to lost boys like me, and lost boys like me are free. Neverland is home to lost boys like me, and lost boys like me are free. sprinkle me in pixie dust and told me to believe in him and believe in me. Together we will fly away in a cloud of green to your beautiful destiny. As we soared above the town that never loved me, I realized I finally had a family. Soon enough we reached Neverland. Peacefully my feet hit the sand, and ever since that day I am a lost boy from Neverland, usually hanging out with Peter Pan. And when we're bored we'd play in the woods, always on the run from Captain Hook. Run, run, lost boy, they say to me, away from all of reality. Neverland is home to lost boys like me, and lost boys like me are free. Neverland is home to lost boys like me, and lost boys like me are free. Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, Wendy, darling, even Captain Hook, you are my perfect storybook. Neverland, I love you so, you are now my home, sweet home forever, a lost boy at last. Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, Wendy, darling, even Captain Hook, you are my perfect storybook. Neverland, I love you so, you are now my home, sweet home forever, a lost boy at last. And for always I will say, I am a lost boy from Neverland, usually hanging out with Peter Pan. And when we're bored we'd play in the woods, always on the run from Captain Hook. Run, run, lost boy, they say to me, away from all of reality. Neverland is home to lost boys like me, and lost boys like me are free. Neverland is home to lost boys like me, and lost boys like me are free.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, and a special treat for you. And don't forget that tomorrow we have the Brisbane show of Shreya Ghoshal. So if no tickets are available on Ticket Hacker, if you haven't got your tickets, do secure yours now because limited seats are still available. So I'd like you to, if you haven't booked your tickets yet, book it, and we will see you all there tomorrow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you in today's weekend edition. We'll be back at 10, and obviously at 10 o'clock we are coming with the doctor's program, Aapki Sehat. Until then, it's goodbye from us.